Welcome to ZumboCon. There we go. Welcome. This will be dedicated to discussing the Kazakhstan model, which I'm currently trying to implement. And though it's not going to be implemented in Kazakhstan, it's going to be implemented by the shadow government in Finland. And yes, I actually have contact with the shadow government. It's interesting. They're not as powerful as you think, but they are pretty powerful. Now, we're going to be talking about, and I encourage you guys to comment and talk on the chat function there. We're going to be talking about the main basic theory that we're working under with the Kazakhstan model. And it's that lowering corporate tax while increasing value added tax lowers the unemployment. Once the unemployment is lowered, the cost of social services will go down, and that will be the boon that we're looking for. That's the theory. Now, as with any theory, this can blow up gloriously. We can have an absolute disaster or an absolute miracle. Now, in the Kazakhstani model, we had some interesting results. We had an increase in life expectancy, and most of the indicators went in the right direction. It looked like we would be doing well, but I cannot guarantee this for reality. It is unverifiable. The shadow government is doing the tests. It is seeing what happens if I do this and if the government does this and so on and so forth. You can see some ripples of this in the Finnish politics when they are talking about the prime minister having 850 bucks a month for food on the government expense. And then you look at what I'm getting from the government, and it's to nobody's great surprise, 850. So you can see that these things percolate. So when you do a reform of this nature, there will always be some sort of awareness of what's going on. But on the positive side, Finland is recovering better than expected from the corona pandemic. And this seems to be partly because of these reforms, but I cannot guarantee it. There are some aspects which I would like to bring to attention, such as the fact that when we did the liberalization sweep, we proposed every law that can be liberalized to be liberalized by one step, and we got around 20 or 30 laws that could be liberalized. And of these laws, maybe 20, maybe 30% at most passed, and the rest didn't. And that seems to be the trend. So that when you propose everything that you can think of that somebody wants to liberalize, from age limitations on pornography and violence to going to a multi-party system from a single-party system, you end up with perhaps 30% of the votes going through. Some of the things in the Kazakhstan model were a little weird, such as the fact that hunters couldn't get guns and things like that. But that is because I believe because it is a communist state and they don't generally like everybody having guns. So I will be somewhat watching Norse map or threat map and seeing some things, but I believe we have already discussed this over there to sufficient extent. And I believe I would be more interested in talking with you on the chat, dear audience. And if you have any questions on what I did, what reforms I did, what the indicators are, I can still load up the game. I believe the save game didn't get corrupted this time. It previously did, but if it got corrupted, then we're done with the model. But if it didn't get corrupted, I can load it up and show you some of these statistics and data and see what we are up against here. It was interesting that I, for example, got thrown out of the World Trade Organization, the IMF, the International Criminal Court and so on. But that seems to be because these don't like state-run countries. They don't like state capitalism. These are the kinds of organizations that strongly prefer private sector. And I won't make a value statement here about which is better. I will just say that they inherently dislike state capitalism or corporatism. They are not in that camp. Now, I am, when I do these models, a very strong in favor of state capitalism, because when you need to build an economy from scratch, state capitalism is basically the only way to go. When you have a functioning economy, you can rely on the private sector. But if during your build-up period you rely on the private sector, you're going to end up being a resource producer instead of a goods producer or refined goods producer. And that seems to be an aspect of what this European model is all about. Getting all these developing countries to produce the resources which we refine into the end products. This seems to be the thing. So they dislike it when somebody like Kazakhstan, which gets 30% of its GDP from oil, starts to, stop selling oil and instead refines that oil into petroleum and sells petroleum. They dislike that because it's going to end up influencing the petroleum refineries of Europe. This we have seen to be colonialism. I have a historic dislike for colonialism, so take that for what it is. So if you have any questions, want to see any specific data sets, want to talk about how the shadow government is implementing this, what I experience when the shadow government implements this, what kind of living standards I'm going through, what reforms I'm going through, and so on, I would be glad to answer. And please ask questions, because this is a topic that is of great importance to me. I have noted that almost no politician anywhere provides a simulation of what their model would be like. They talk and they talk and they talk some more, but when it's a hard data set that you can compare, when they say we will increase this tax by 1%, here is this model that we built that cost 10 million to build, and it says these things will happen, you don't see it. It's always some IPCC factor or somebody from the very large globalists who builds a simulator, and then everybody relies on that simulator. Nobody builds their own simulator or uses one of the ones commercially available. This I noticed when I was campaigning for parliament back in 2011, and it seemed counterintuitive. It seemed like it was not a good idea. It was a very bad idea. And it seems like everybody who runs for parliament or government office of high stature at least should publish a simulation of what they would do if they were in that office, what they would actually propose. Would they overrule the parliament? Would they overrule the people? Where they are asking for public votes and so on and so forth. This would give us a good comparison point between what they actually propose in paper, in writing, in what you can see in a data set, and what they actually do. And I believe that may be one of the core components of why they don't do it. So this is my model. It is very simple. We increase the value-added tax, which hurts everybody basically equally, and includes the tourists, which aren't usually taxed because the price of consumer goods will go up. And then we increase or help the poor people in our country who are inflicted by this value-added tax raise, but we don't really help tourists. We lower the bar of how easy it is for tourists to get into the country to sidestep